On June 20th, 2025, Rico, a black African-American male living in Memphis, Tennessee at the time, received a call during the lunch hour from a special lady to ask for his assistance. Without hesitation, Rico started getting ready to walk out of his living quarters. Upon arrival at his destination, another resident that lived at the location was in the middle of doing a client's hair. The client, who happens to look so familiar to Rico, was a decent, well-rounded lady whom seemed to be a veteran of life's operations. Not too long after that, the lady who requested Rico's assistance arrived. She purchased food for them, a quick meal before prepping for the next day. As they were eating, multiple topics of conversations filled the room. All four people, the three ladies and Rico, discussed overseas experiences, the safety of transportation here in the country, and local incidents. While on the topic of crime, Rico couldn't help but explain why there was so much going on in the world: evilness. One lady said she would defend herself if needed, while Rico disagrees with fighting against flesh and blood. The lady insisted that God has given us 5 senses and to trust them alone, insinuating that God encourages independent judgments rather than being dependent on God. Rico reminds her about Adam and Eve, how they failed by trusting their own senses, even when God has given them instructions on what to eat. The conversation debate continued, and the lady mentioned how God encouraged people to be tempted by Satan, quoting the famous chit-chat between God and Satan about a man named Job in the Bible. Rico then disagrees, stating that God doesn't tempt people with evil, and if that offer to Satan was true, then that within itself would be a form of temptation of men. Rico then began to elaborate on Abraham and expresses his beliefs that God wouldn't instruct someone to unalive their son, which is another example of deception about God tempts men. The lady responded by saying God wanted to see his faith, and that it wasn't temptation but instructions, and that people back then had to sacrifice in order to please God. The other two ladies was quietly listening to the debate. Rico then expresses to her that God, whom creates us, human, wouldn't create us just to have us sacrificing each other, and that God is all-knowing and knew us before he formed us in our mother's womb. The lady at this point grew impatient and started to step away from the topic. Rico expresses to her that not everything in Humans Inc. is entirely accurate. The lady saw her chance. She instantly discredited Rico based on the fact that he doesn't believe words in ink that teaches that God encourages sufferings, Satan, sacrificing, etc., informing Rico that he needs to go back and read it to learn it. Although Rico's defense is about by God, revealing the deception inside and parts of the Bible, God, and teaches the examples of Jesus Christ, the comprehension of recognizing the contradiction of God's attributes in the Bible is easily overlooked. But Rico knew why this often happens and did not take offense. Many throughout time came along and challenged the Bible, creating a tradition of challenges from skeptics around the world during every time era. Rico knows that this was planned by Satan to implement contradictions that will lead many ashtray that knew something didn't add up, but couldn't figure it out on their own, therefore tempting them elsewhere. While those who choose to believe can come across anyone that says it's a typo in the Bible, and it is automatically rejected in defense of holding on to their faith. Although Rico understood this, Rico knows that holding on to faith without understanding is strong faith. Jesus Christ wasn't accepted when he came to teach. Rico see the same things happening today. Many rejects the Holy Spirit teachings. Although Jesus taught us to remain in love and never hate, not to fight against flesh and blood and not to live by the sword. Jesus didn't come making animal sacrifices, sprinkling blood on people's faces, etc. He came to fulfill the Old Testament, not get rid of it. To fulfill it, he would have made sacrifices at the altar if sacrificing God's creation was God's desire. But God is a God of life, as Jesus is the bread of life. Anything opposite isn't from God. Like the devil prosecuting Jesus on earth, animal sacrifices, which is considered witchcraft today. This isn't the attributes of our loving God. Creating life is God. He's our creator, not our sacrificer.